Right, so number 7 is evil and suffering. Now, there's lots of questions for this one, so I'm just going to get straight into it. Now, the first question is to describe Catholic views on the existence of evil. Well, first thing you need to focus on here is where evil originated from, and that is the fall. Okay, so Catholics believe that it originated from the fall, where Adam and Eve defied God's only instruction of not eating the fruit from the tree of knowledge. All right, and that caused disharmony in the world. All right, and that is when evil, pain, suffering, and death became part of the world. It was our fault. Now, the next one, Catholics believe that all humanity is born with original sin. All right, and that's because of Adam and Eve's original sin. Okay, what they did when they turned against God is that's marked all of humanity. All right, and is now acts as our sort of our compulsion or our desire, our want to do evil. All right. Now, lots of Catholic views are based on Augustinian theodicy. Okay, and this is the belief, all right, that evil doesn't come from God. Okay, but it comes from us turning away from God, and when God isn't present. Okay, so it's down to us, not to God. You can also, or you need to, all right, link to the views of Irenaeus and Hick, okay, speak about soul making. We've all been made in the image and likeness of God. Now, they go image and likeness, two separate things. So we look like God, but our likeness, okay, we are alike to him, but we strive to be like him. Okay, so what that means is that we go through a process of soul making. Now, that is, right, we have the compulsion to do good, all right, and as we do good throughout our lives, that is where we become like God rather than in his likeness. Now, another view on evil and suffering is you've got to focus on the two different types of evil. One being moral evil, down to the misuse of free will, so things like rape and murder. Then you've got the other one is natural evil, so things like tsunamis, hurricanes, all right? And Catholics believe that this is not caused by God, but instead it is caused by the disharmony, disharmony in the world because of the fall, so therefore what's called the fault of human beings. Now, the only thing is that doesn't wash with some people, okay? They say that the existence of evil and suffering equals God doesn't exist. Now, this is quite straightforward what you've got to do here. Now, God is supposed to be omnipotent, omnibenevolent, omniscient. Well, if God is all of those things, all loving, all knowing, and all powerful, then why does he allow evil and suffering to exist? Well, sorry, some people would say he doesn't exist as a result. Those 3 points you can use in the describe as 3 separate sentences. To back that up, all right, then you can talk about the fact that this is called the inconsistent triad. All right, so it's the idea that God isn't always all loving, all knowing, and all powerful, or that some people believe that. Or that it's difficult to defend, and as a result, some people say, well, if those key things about God are not necessarily true, is there a God? Does he exist? This can lead to atheism, all right? Now, the final thing, all right, is you can focus on the fact that God is supposed to be omnipresent as well. Well, if God is always there, why does evil occur? Why doesn't God intervene? Now, those are sort of the 5 things to focus on. Now, for your exam, you need to know how Catholics respond to these issues, okay? So, there's lots of different ways, right? Now, first of all, when evil and suffering occurs, you've got to look at what they actually do about it, all right? Now, Catholics believe that it's an opportunity to do God's work, all right? So, it could be that they volunteer, that they, that they donate to CAFOD, that type of idea. So, evil and suffering provides us with an opportunity to do God's work. Now, another one is that evil and suffering needs to exist, otherwise earth and heaven are just the same thing, okay? That they would both be perfect. Well, that isn't the case. So therefore, God allows evil and suffering, all right, as a way in which, that human beings can fully appreciate heaven when they die. So, for example, my favourite food, okay, is probably chocolate, okay? Chocolate. Well, if I'd only ever eaten chocolate in my life, and I'd never eaten salad, then I wouldn't have any idea just how good and delicious that chocolate was, because I wouldn't have a point of comparison. I wouldn't appreciate it, okay? It'd just be normality for me. So that is what God is trying to overcome by allowing evil and suffering to exist. The other one, all right, 3rd point is the fact that evil and suffering occurs because of the misuse of free will. It's our fault, okay? God gave us free will, and we have decided to misuse it, all right? And that's why moral evil exists. Another one, okay, is that God allows evil and suffering to exist because God is testing us. us. He's testing how we use our free will and how we respond to evil and suffering. And that you can link that idea to what's called the ideas promoted by Irenaeus and Hick about the fact that in our lives we are being tested to what's called go through the process of soul making to be like God, and the benefits of that is that we will gain salvation by going to heaven. Now, the other one, Catholics respond by saying natural evil isn't the fault of God. All right, and you can use it's called Augustinian theodicy to back that up. All right, but because by saying that it's actually caused because of the fall and when we turned away from God, or when there's an absence of God. Natural evil is the result of the actions of humans and not something that has been created by God. Now, the other one is that the final things that Catholics will argue that we don't always understand God's plan. God is is all-knowing, is omniscient, and we are not. So therefore, maybe God has a plan for us, or that we do not always fully understand. So for me personally, I remember as a teenager that my faith was really tested when my grandmother passed away. Okay, and I stopped going to church for a short while, and I felt that I questioned God's existence. However, that after a while I would turn back to God. And later on in life, when I lost my other grandmother, who was very close to me, I felt like I was more prepared for it, for that experience that I'd had earlier on in my life. And I think it helped me, it was called other things in my life that I've sort of gone through that have made me struggle, that they've helped prepare me for my life today. All right, so it links with the idea that sometimes there are some things that happen in our lives that are beyond our comprehension. God has a plan for us. God works in mysterious ways. Now, you've also got then, right, to explain Catholic and Jewish teachings on the existence of evil. I'm not going to go into the Catholic one, all right? I've just gone and spent a lot of time doing that as I described it. You just got to make sure you write those as Pete paragraphs, okay? When it comes to the Jewish view, now this is slightly different. A lot of similarities, but it is slightly different, okay? They believe once again, they distance, all right, God from causing evil and suffering, all right, and say that it's because of the fall and misuse of free will, but as is often the case, all right, the Jewish view is very complex, okay, with some arguing that God has actually created evil and suffering as a way to punish humanity, and that others even argue that Satan dwells within us, okay? It's almost like that little bit within us telling us to do, it's temptation, okay? That is temptation is compelling us to do evil, all right? Now, if we look at what's called the idea that it's caused by what's called even suffering caused by humans, when you're talking about the fall, it's the same teachings that you would use for what's called the Catholics and the idea of Genesis, all right? And when it comes to the misuse of free will, where you need a different teaching, the Tanakh states, "See, today I have set before you a free choice between life and good on one side and death and evil on the other." And that's the sort of idea of that God has given us free will, all right, where we can decide. The other one, all right, that if you're going to say that, if you're going to use the idea that God has created it to punish us, to punish humanity, all right, or to test our faith, then a teaching that supports this, all right, is that Jewish teaching states a person is obligated to bless upon the bad just as he blesses upon the good. Okay, so that teaching backs up that idea. Now, finally, you could be asked the idea, all right, or you could be asked the evaluation question, the existence of evil and suffering proves that God does not exist. If that happens, then what you do is that you just use the Jewish answer, you use the Catholic answer, and you use the idea that I've spoke about before, about the fact that how can an omnibenevolent, omniscient, omnipotent God allow evil and suffering to exist, all right? And you create paragraphs using that. Ensure that you use the word, okay, inconsistent triad if you really want to get up to your A stars.